Hi, I'm Miss Becky from the Montgomery County Norristown Public Library, and today I'm going to show you how to make a little Christmas tree ornament, a tree ornament. It can turn out like this, la la, or like this, la la. So I will show you the materials that you will need. If you get a packet from the library, you will have in it everything you need to hand sew except for a pair of scissors. You'll have everything but the scissors and the pins if you have pins. So I'm going to show you, if you don't have a packet from the library, I will show you how to start this without those things. And if you got a packet, you can just fast forward through that part. So if you're starting this project from scratch, these are the things that you're going to need. You'll need a piece of scrap paper or cardboard. I'm using an old file folder. Makes a nice sturdy template. You will need a ruler and a pencil to draw your template. You will need some fabric, either 100% cotton or a cotton polyester blend works well. Just something that's not stretchy. And you don't need a huge amount of it. You will need some scissors or pinking shears. These are scissors that cut this kind of cool zigzaggy design, and that works well for the exposed edge of your project. You will need some matching thread or not matching thread, depending upon what you prefer, and a sewing needle. Just like that. You will need some stuffing. This is called polyfill or fiberfill, and you can get this at the craft store. Walmart, I think, has it. Any place that sells crafts has it. And you don't need much of that either. So that's that. You'll need a piece of narrow ribbon. This is about 1/4 inch wide. You could even get narrower ribbon than that, probably like 1/8 of an inch. Or if you have yarn, you could use yarn instead. The ribbon looks prettier, but you need about 6 inches of that. You'll need some buttons of various sizes and colors. I would say to try to keep them 1/2 inch wide or narrower. This one might be 5/8 inch. Because you have to fit them in a small space. But these are going to be your ornaments for your tree, so you want different colors if you can. You may want them all to be the same color. You may like white buttons, white ornaments. You may have a theme color that you like, silver, I don't know. But gather your buttons. And I think that is probably, if you have some straight pins, they're helpful. You can have this kind with the ball on the end, or just these straight metal ones with just a metal end. That will just help keep your project together as you're sewing it. And if you plan to use the sewing machine to do a sewing machine version of this, you, of course, need a sewing machine threaded with the thread that you want to use for your project. So I'm going to show you how to make a template, and we're going to start, I said the one that I made was 5 inches across the bottom and 5 inches up the middle. So from tip to bottom, 5 inches, from side to side, 5 inches. So in order to get that line, to find the middle, we have to divide 5 by 2, or divide it in half. So 5 divided by 2 is, or 5, 1/2 of 5 is, do the math. You got it? 2 1/2, 2.5. So we want to do 2.5 inches over from the edge, and we're going to draw a line, and that'll be our halfway point. 2.5, and I usually do 3 or 4 dots just to make sure everything's even. And then I'm going to connect the dots with my ruler. And actually I'm going to find my 5-inch mark right here. 5 inches here. And then I'm going to line that up against the edge of the paper, whatever. And then connect my 3 dots. And that is roughly the center. So I'm just going to make a little mark here at the end of the ruler. And this doesn't have to be precise. This is just what you want, and you can make it bigger or smaller. Now I'm going to measure 2.5 inches over from the middle again, so that I have the full 5 inches along the bottom. So now I'm going to connect this dot and this dot. Like so. And then this dot in the corner. Like that. And there you go. We have some kind of triangle that I'm not sure what it's called because it's been a very long time since I've been in geometry class. You probably know though. You can tell me. So now I'm just going to cut this out. Make sure that if you really want to be serious about sewing, that you have a separate pair of scissors just for fabric, because paper will dull your scissors blades, and you don't want that. You want nice sharp scissors for your projects. Now, what I did was I just folded this in half just to make sure that everything is symmetrical. You know what symmetrical is, right? It's the same on both sides. And I'm a little tiny bit off, so I'm just going to trim that just a little bit, just so they're even. Okay. So now I have my template. I'm ready to mark my fabric. So now what you should do is open it up so you have the back side. I should have ironed this, but I didn't. And you can tell the back side on most pieces of fabric, the good side, the pattern is brighter. In this case, there is no pattern on the back side, so very easy to see. So you want to put your back sides, your wrong side, up, and we're going to double the fabric. We're going to do 2 layers at one time. Make sure everything's even as you can get it. Because there is a direction to fabric. And then you're going to lay your template down, and you're going to make sure as best as you can. I just eyeball it, but just check and make sure you're not cockeyed when you're laying this out, that it's pretty straight with the straight edge. And you could do, if you really want it to be close to the edge, you could, and check it if your edge is even. I just have a little cut here I'm trying to avoid. All right, I'm going to pull it back a little bit from the edge because I'm going to use the pinking shears when I'm done here. And I want a little bit of an edge. And you're just going to trace around your template onto your fabric. And we always do this on the wrong side because if you make a mistake, nobody sees it. Okay, so I have my triangle here. And I'm going to cut it out with the pinking shears. You can just use regular scissors. I'm just going to go a little bit on the outside. Actually, I'm going to start on this way. I'm going to cut a little bit on the outside of my line. And if you're using pinking shears, make sure you match up your cuts so that all of your zigzags are even. Like if I have to match up that dip with what's already there in the fabric so that it doesn't look choppy. Okay, so there's one side. Just make sure your fabric stays together as you're cutting it. And you can put a pin just to make sure things don't shift as you're cutting, especially with the pinking shears, because you kind of want your edges to match up. So now I'm going to go down this way. And like I said, you can just do this with regular scissors as well. And then I'm going to go across the bottom. Matching up my divots, my V's, whatever you want to call them. Okay. All right, so there's our triangle. And you can see if it's they're very close in measurement, but the top edge is just a little bit taller. See, that's more like 5.5 inches on the sides, and then 5 inches across the bottom, so that you know that this is the top. Okay, so now we have a decision to make. Do you want to have your edges showing? Or do you want to sew them inside, or sew them so that they're inside and you can't see them, your seams? I'm going to sew this with the edges outside because I like the zigzaggy effect here. So first thing you're going to do is you're going to sew on the buttons. You're going to figure out which ones you want to have on each side. And if you just want buttons on one side, if you figure no one's going to see the back side, so I can keep that part against the tree or wherever you hang it, then you can skip it. But you know, if you're tired of sewing buttons, there's only 4. Don't mind. So just figure out kind of where you'd like to have them. Okay, so I have 3 big ones and 3 medium ones and 2 small ones. So I'll put, I don't know, just kind of randomize them. Put purple down there. And you know what, I'm going to move this. And you can put more. If you've gotten the library packet, but we need a yellow one on this side. If you've gotten the library packet, you got 8 buttons. Or maybe I gave you 10. I think I gave you 10. So just figure out where you want them placed. If you have 10, you just have to have them a little closer together. And just sort of think about how your ornaments go on a Christmas tree and just place them accordingly. Be sure that you stay at least a 1/2 inch away from the edge, because you're going to be sewing there and you don't want any buttons there where you're sewing. So I don't know. Or you can put them in a line, do them more symmetrically, more evenly, whatever. That way you need 6. So anyway, I'm going to do the 4. So what ones did I have there? I didn't have this. I didn't have this. Okay, so I'm going to put the orange one in the middle. All right, so just figure out if you want to put mark with your pencil, because you can't keep them there. You have to pick up your fabric and all the buttons are going to fall off. Or you can just sort of memorize where they are. So now we're going to get our thread and we're going to thread our needle. So I always like to pull out from my nose. Well, let's get the end of the thread here. End of the thread, and then like an arm's length from my nose. And then I double that. That gives you a nice long thread. Hopefully it won't tangle up much on you. So you just clip it off. And then find one end, undouble it, find one end, and stick it through. And you have old eyes, old tired eyes. It's not always easy to do. Maybe your needle has a smaller hole than normal. Oh, there we go. Okay. Got it through the eye. Now we're going to pull it till your ends are even. So find your two ends. Make sure they're both there together. Okay, so you're going to take your two ends. You're going to pinch the ends between your fingers. You're going to wrap it around your index finger. You make kind of like an X and pinch. Keep wrapped around there. Darn it. Stay there. And you're going to let's try that again. Pinch at the X. And then you're going to roll. You're going to push your thumb towards the tip of your finger. You're going to roll the thread. You notice it's twisting, and as you pull it off, pull it, pinch where it's all bunched up, and pull it tight. And there you have a knot. Okay, so now memorize where your buttons are, because now we're going to sew. Okay, so you're going to start with the back side, and you're going to put your needle through the back side and come up to the front side. Now remember, you're staying away from the edges. So I've got, whoop, came out. I've got mine about right in the middle for that first one. And you're going to bring your thread all the way through. Now you're going to get your button, and you're going to stick your needle through one of the holes. Make sure it's face up the way you want it. And you're going to pull your thread up there. Now you're going to go down into the second hole to the other side, and you're going to pull, stay out of there, you're going to pull your thread tight, and you're going to keep doing this for about 5 or 6 times. So you want to keep that nice and tight. Up through from the bottom, down from the top. Up. Sometimes it's hard to find the hole. Come on, where are you? Up from the bottom, down from the top. What was that, 3? From the bottom, down through the top. Let's do one more here. Now this button is interesting because it's got 3 holes. Most buttons either have 2 or 4. Kind of looks like a surprise face. So I'm just going to come up and do a few more. Okay, so if you have more than 2 holes, you need to jump to the next hole. This is probably bad example because you're not going to have a 3-hole button. I'm just going to hit all the holes. Okay. Have a little triangle in the middle. These come up from the bottom and down through the top. You always have to remember where you started. So if you come up from the bottom, you always have to go down. You go down from the top, you always have to come up. Okay, so my weird 3-hole button is right there. So now we're going to flip it over the back. Now there are one of two ways you can do this. You can tie off each button, which will make it neater on the back, and you'll waste less thread. Or you can be lazy and just go on to the next button. But I'm going to show you first how to tie it off. So you're going to go where you stitched, and you're going to take a stitch into the fabric through those stitches. So you see that? And then you're going to pull that into a loop. Get the fabric out of the way. Pull that into a loop. I probably should have used white thread so you could actually see what I'm doing. Almost tight, but not quite. You see there's a loop right there. You're going to come up underneath that loop with your needle and go through it. And darn it, you keep wanting to catch on to the edges of my thread or fabric. Okay, and then you just pull that tight so you've made a knot. And then you're going to come up again, do it again, same thing, up through those, underneath those stitches, with loop, come up from back behind and go through it. So you've double knotted it. And then I just take another stitch just so I don't cut my thread off too short. Okay. And then clip it off. So now we have to make another knot. Make sure your two ends are together. I always like to use double thread because that's double strong. Oh, and I got a little knot here because I tangled. My moment, please. Seriously, and it's right up near the needle. I have to fix this. Okay, that knot was a lost cause. My thread is much shorter now. Okay, what did we have? We had the orange one, and then we have the orange one. Yeah, I think that's how I did it. Okay, so you see this one has 2 holes. It's going to be easier. If you really don't like sewing buttons, just find 2 holers. Okay, so we're just going to do what we did before and just go up through one hole and down through the next. And come on, up through one hole, down through the next. And up through one hole, down through the next, and maybe one more. That'd be about 5, I think. And down. Okay. Let's flip it over. And my thread is too short to sew another button. I got a loop there. Oh well, nobody's going to see it. So just come up under those stitches. Pull it almost tight. Come in from behind. And knot. Pull it tight. Again. Up from underneath. Back to the loop. Pull it tight. And then one more stitch. Clip it off. Okay, so now I have 2, and then I was going to do like that, I think, right? Okay, now I got a 4-holer, and you always got to decide which side you want to have facing up. I think I want the flat. This has kind of a rounded side on one side. I think I want the flat one down. Now, if you have a 4-hole button, you can either sew from this hole to this hole, or you can do diagonal from this hole to this hole, and then you make kind of an X. So I think that's what I'm going to do, just to give it a little more visual interest is to go across and make an X. You see, I went from that hole, I skipped that hole, went then that one to that one. One. Two. Come on. Come on. Get in there. Dang it. Two, two, two. Whoop, wrong hole. Three. Uh-oh. How did that happen? Look what I did. See, things like this happen. I missed the hole. How did I do that? Sometimes you can just pull by the thread and the weave of your fabric is wide enough that it'll pop right out. If it doesn't, sometimes you just have to cut it off at the needle and then try to thread both your threads into the hole, which is not fun. So pay attention, watch what you're doing, unlike me, and go down into your hole. The proper one. We'll do one more here. Now, I'm going to hop over to one of the unsewn holes. See that? Now I'm going to go down in the other unsewn hole. And you see, I've made an X. Come up. Get my pencil out of there. And go down. And come up. And go down. And guess what? You now know how to sew on a button. So if a button falls off your shirt or your pants or your skirt or wherever you have a button, you can put it back on all by yourself. And that pencil is getting in my way. Okay. So now we have our button with our little X. Isn't that so cute? And then we're going to flip it. Now, I'm going to show you if you want to be lazy and not tie it off every time. But like I said, you waste thread. You can just leave your tail like this and come over to where you're going to sew your next button. But you have to be careful when you're pulling it up that you don't pull it too tight. Because if you pull it too tight, then you bunch up your fabric. And that's not what you want to do. Okay, so keep it nice and loose in the back there. Nobody's going to see it. It's going to be inside. We'll find our red button. This one's also a 4-holer. And I guess I'll do this side. So when you do that first stitch, you got to make sure you're not pulling it too tight. Okay, so find your other. I'm going to do the X again. And okay, so you don't want to pull that tight. Keep it loosey-goosey. Now, the second stitch you can pull tight because from now on you want it to be tight. So your button doesn't come off. So the balls don't fall off your tree. Just make sure you don't catch the edges of your fabric in there. Now I'm going to hop over to the other hole and go down in. Up and down, up and down. This is really kind of a calming exercise here. You're just pulling on through. Okay. So now I'm going to tie off. Did the other ones. Up underneath the stitching. Pull your thread almost tight. Come back up through the loop and pull it tight. Another stitch. Leave a loop. Come up through the loop. Pull it tight. Go in under your stitches and make a full stitch. And clip off your thread. Okay, so now you have the front of your little tree. And like I said, you can put as many buttons on as you want. I just chose 4 because it takes less time. Okay, so now we're going to sew. So now the decision you need to make is, do you want to have your edges sticking out and you're just going to sew on the top? That's probably the easiest way to do it. Or do you want to sew it so your edges are inside and fold it in so that you can't see them? So if you want to do it with the edges sticking out, you just put your fabric with the wrong sides together. See that? Wrong side, right side. The right side should be on the outside. Okay? Now if you want to sew it so that your seams are on the inside, you have to put your right sides together. So you're going to put your button sides, if you've sewn buttons on the back side, which I didn't. So you're going to put them together like that, okay? So that your wrong sides are on the outside. So I'm going to go back to this way. Now we're going to take your ribbon or your yarn or whatever it is you have. You're going to fold it in half. Kind of crease it with your fingers a little bit, just so you know where the middle is. This will be important later. Now you're going to make an overhand knot. And that's just kind of like when you knotted your thread. You make an X, but then you bring your tail around behind and up through the loop. And you want to push it so that the knot is close to the ends of your ribbon. So you have a loop like that. And that's what you're going to hang your tree. Now you could, if you wanted to, I'm going to keep the knot out because it's just going to be easier to sew this. But if you want to hide your knot, you can sandwich it in there and then just have a loop like that. But then you kind of have this lump of a knot there at the top. So I'm going to do it this way. So I'm going to stick mine in there right at the tip. Remember, if you're confused about where the tip is, just measure your side, the 5.5 sides. These are the bottom corners. So now I'm just going to make sure my edges are lined up, especially since the edges are zigzagged. I want to try to get them even as I can. Match them up there. And that's why you cut them out together if you're using the pinking shears. And I'm just going to put a few pins in here. Whoop, there goes my ribbon. We'll have to fix that. Just put a few pins in here just to keep everything from sliding around. if you pull your top down, you can see that I'm putting it right there. And get in there. Down in far enough. It has to be further than 1/4 of an inch down. Okay? So there's that. Now, if you were going to sew it the other way, I have to take this out, with your edges inside, and this has no pattern, so you can't really tell which is the right side, which is the wrong side. But if you're going to sew with your edges that you want, turn your edges in where nobody can see them, then you have to put your ribbon like this. Because what'll happen is you'll sew everything together this way, and then you'll turn it right side out. And when you turn it right side out, your ribbon will be sewn down here, and then you'll flip it up and it'll be tucked inside. The edges of it will be tucked inside with C. I know, clear as mud, right? Okay, I'm going to put this back in here and then we'll get started with the sewing. Okay, so we have to knot our thread again. Remember, we pinch it, wrap it around, pinch at the X where it crosses over, and roll it off your finger. The fingers are dry, so they don't want to roll. And as you roll, you pull the thread up, you pinch it between your fingernails, and then you have your knot. That one's kind of small, so I'm going to do it again. The more times it can wrap around, bigger your knot's going to be. Okay, that's better. See that? And I'm just going to cut that little bit of tail. You don't want it too close to the knot, but you also don't need all that much sticking out there. So I'm going to cut about 2/3 of it off. See now? It just has an itty bitty tail. So now I'm going to start by starting at the bottom. And I'm going to do a little less than halfway. I'm going to start because we need to leave an opening because we need to put stuffing inside. So I'm going to start by opening up the edge a little bit. And I'm going to take my first stitch on just one side because I want that knot to be up inside where nobody can see it. So right there. Now we're going to sew about 1/4 of an inch away from the edge. And if you want to measure to see how accurate I am, and I'm right on the spot there. If you're nervous about keeping even, you can measure 1/4 inch in and mark it lightly with a pencil so that you have a line to follow. Or you can just eyeball it like I'm going to do. So you've come up through. Now we're going to go down. And then the same space away, we're going to come up. So you went down and up. And you can pull that in. And that's your first running stitch. We're going to do the running stitch, which is just down and up all the way around. Now, to make this go faster, you can go down and up and then go down again, same distance away. Try to keep your stitches the same length. Up, go down. As long as your needle will take fabric, you can keep doing this. You can do many stitches at once. You see how I have several stitches on my needle right now? I think I can maybe get one more. Maybe get me to the corner. See? And now I'm going to push my needle through and pull it. And just be careful you don't get your thread caught on your pins. Probably don't even need that one anymore. I'm going to move that one over here. Okay, pull your thread tight and just be careful. Sometimes your double threads get uneven and you get a little bubble of thread. So just kind of from time to time, just kind of smooth through your thread to the end of the needle. So now see, we have half of that bottom already sewed. So now we're going to pivot at the corner. And if you're sewing with the so that your stitches are going to be on the inside, you're going to do the same thing, just on the wrong side of the fabric. Okay, so we're going to go down again and come up and go down and come up, down and up and down and up, maybe one more, down and up. And the only thing you have to watch when you're doing it like this is that you don't pull it too tight, because if you do, then your fabric bunches up. And I'm stuck on the corner. Okay, so you want to pull it snug, but not so tight that it bunches up like that. So if that happens, you just sort of pinch your fingernails and pull it so that it's loose again. Okay, so you keep going. We'll go up to the top, down. Just try to keep them even, keep them evenly spaced. Make sure you're staying 1/4 inch away. And I saw something on somewhere, Pinterest probably, where someone measured 1/4 inch on their fingernail and made a mark. You probably need, you probably need a felt tip marker, because that kind of pen's not going to work on my fingernail. Anyway, you make a mark, 2 marks 1/4 inch apart, and then you can always measure as you go. Anything you can do to make your life easier, I say go for it. Down and up. Whoops, that one's a little bit long. Down, up, down, up, down, and up. Push it through, pull it through. Watch that pin, that doesn't get stuck on there. And then pull it. My thread, I don't know if you can see it, there's a tiny little bubble there. So I just have to kind of find which thread is the one that's loose. Kind of separate them out and pull them. And then I just run my fingernails over there to make sure they're not bunched up. Pull my thread all the way to the needle. Make sure everything's even. And continue. Almost to the top, to the tippy top. And then we'll sew that, make sure that ribbon is sewn underneath. Just be careful, don't poke your fingers with the needle or with the pins when you get close to them. It's not hard to do. Okay, I'm going to stop right there because I'm right at the ribbon. Push it and then pull it. And get off of my pin. Seriously. I'm getting rid of you because you're a bother. Okay. I think I'm going to have a bubble again. Yeah, and then I see I pulled too tight and I bunched it up. So I need to do that first. Now I need to find which thread made the bubble. Not that one. Seriously, which one are you? Not that one. There. Ah! Keep punching it up. Okay, just run your finger over it. Fingers. I'm gonna just pinch that thread and make sure everything's even. Okay, now we've got the ribbon inside there. And I am going to make sure that this next stitch goes down into the ribbon and comes back out at the ribbon. I'll take that pin out so you can see I've caught the ribbon inside there. And I'm going to make another stitch right there just to make sure, another couple, just to make sure that ribbon is secure. So I'm just going to go up in and one more, just to be sure. So I'm going down into the bottom of the ribbon and coming up close to the tip. You just want to make sure that's secure, because you don't want your little ornament falling down when you put it up, when you hang it up. Okay, so now we've come to the tip and we're going to go down the other side. Just make sure you got your 1/4 inch away from the edge. Then we're going to continue down and up and down and up. Getting a little close to the edge here. Get back to my 1/4 inch. Down and up. Down and up. Push it from the bottom and then pull the tip at the end of the needle. And I'm just going to keep going around till we get down to this corner, and I'll be back. Okay, so I've gotten almost all the way around. I've left this much open on the bottom. And I'm just going to kind of tuck my needle in at the edge here, just so I know where it is. And then I'm going to get my thread out of the way, and then we're going to open this up, and we're going to stuff it. So we're going to take some of this fluffy stuff. Now we're going to start with just a little tiny bit, and we're just going to poke that up. You know what? I'm just going to let this needle hang free, because I think it's going to poke me. Get out of there. Okay, we're just going to let it hang. And then I'm just going to put a little bit of fluff. I'm going to push it down in, find the tip up there. You don't want to fill this too full, because you don't want to stress your stitches too much. And I'm going to do all the corners first, the points. And just pull off little pieces. It's easier to work with little pieces, because you can always add more. But if you put a big chunk in there, then you got a big chunk. And if you want, you can take a pen or a pencil and sort of ease it up into the points. You don't want it too puffy. And then just keep taking pieces and stuffing them in, coming out from the points to the middle. Just so it's a little bit smushy. And if you've sewn it so that you want the stitches inside, you would need to turn it right side out. And I will show that to you after we finish this. Okay, that's probably pretty good. Get in there, fluffies. Yeah, so you don't want it so that it's straining your stitches. You want to be able to stitch it closed. Okay, so here we go. We're just going to keep going, and if you want, you can put a pin right here to help keep it closed. And we're just going to keep sewing. Just make sure your edges stay even, because with the extra pull from the batting, from the fill, the stuffing, it kind of wants to pull the edges apart. So just try to keep them even as you go. Okay, I think I can take this out now. Just keep going down and up. Okay, so now I've come around to my first stitch, which is taking me into the back. So I'm going to come out the back, out the bottom. Make sure you're not too bunched up there. Okay, now we're on the back side. And if you put buttons on both sides, and it really doesn't matter. So now I'm going to, this is a little tricky, I'm going to try to separate my edges here. And I'm going to bring my needle up into the in-between the two edges, so that I'm just sewing in one side. So now we need to tie this off. So I'm just going to take a little stitch from both sides, just a little bit. You don't want it to show on the outside too much. We're going to pull that almost tight loop, put the needle through, pull it tight, make another little stitch right the same place, and you see I'm on the inside, stitching both sides together, and then pull the loop, and then another little stitch just to give us a tail when we clip off here. And then just be careful you don't cut your edge when you're clipping. So now all that is inside where you can't really see it. Just kind of press it out with your fingers a little bit. And then just mush it around and make sure that everything's even in there, all the stuffing. And there you go. There's your little tree ornament. Your Christmas tree ornament. So now I'm going to show you what it looks like if you sew it with the stitches on the inside. So now I'm going to show you the machine way to sew this, and I'm going to show you with the right sides together. So even if you don't have a machine, if you want to do your sewing with the edges inside, you can just follow the same principle. I want to show you something first though. I have this attachment. This is a button attachment for my sewing machine, and I sewed my buttons on with this. And what it does is you put it in a zigzag stitch with no stitch length, and you zigzag back and forth to sew the button on. So that's a handy dandy little thing. If you have something that looks something like this in your sewing machine kit, that makes your life a little simpler. I'm going to take it off now, maybe. Release the carton. Okay, I'm going to throw that in there for the moment. Get that out here. Put my other foot back on. The normal foot. Oh, and now Get my thread in there. Come out, come out, wherever you are. Okay. So now we are all set up to sew this together. So we have our button side up, and we're going to put our loop, our ribbon loop, like this. We're going to put the fold up in the tip, like that. Because after it's sewn, because all our seams are going to be inside, when we turn it right side out, it's going to be like that. So we're going to put it in like this. Doesn't seem like it will work, but trust me, it does. So we're going to put our, excuse me, we're going to put our, you know, I'm going to pin this down so it doesn't shift around. Okay, stay. Now I'm going to put this top. And remember, we're going to leave a space open at the bottom. So I'm going to pin in a few places just to make sure this doesn't shift as we're sewing. So all of the goods are sandwiched inside, because then we'll turn it right side out, warmed and sewn. Okay, so now we're ready here. And we're going to start like 1/3 of the way along the bottom. So find where you should have 2 threads coming out. Find where they are. Keep track of them. We're going to put our presser, we're going to put this in. We're going to put our fabric even with the edge of the presser foot. And that's going to be our guide to how wide. That makes about 1/4 inch seam. So I like to hold on to my threads for a couple stitches when I start, just to make sure they're secure. Then I'm going to back up, just to make that a little bit stronger, that opening where we're going to stuff. Okay. Move that pin because it's going to be in the way soon. And we go almost to the corner. We go about 1/4 inch away from the point. Then we put the needle down into the fabric with the little knob on the side, and we pivot. Come around, line up your presser foot, and my thread is in the way here. Get out there. Okay, so we're lined up with the presser foot now, and we're going down the side. Just be mindful of that pin down underneath. So we're coming up alongside of it. Make sure that your ribbon is getting caught there. We're 1/4 inch away from there. And I'm just going to get up underneath there now and pull that out because it's making a lump that I don't like. It might be better if you pin it crossways. I don't know. We'll see. Now just keep your fabric even with the edge of the presser foot. Now that button's a little bit close to my presser foot. It's kind of giving me a little bit of attitude there. Okay, down and pivot. And now we're just going to go a little way in, just enough to make the corner the point. I don't like the way you sound there. Oh, ugh. What happened? I have a boo-boo. I have to fix it. So this little thing that looks like a prehistoric weapon is called a seam ripper. And you see that my stitches got kind of bunched up there. So I'm going to rip out those. And that was pretty easy. I'm not sure what happened there. But what I did was I rethreaded my bobbin, my bottom thread, just to make sure everything is where it's supposed to be. And I'm going to redo this corner. So I'm going to start a little bit back and just go over where I've already sewn, about an inch. And this is how you fix your boo-boos. Okay, so it sounds good now. So we're at the pivot point, needle down, press your foot down, and continue. There, that's better. Okay, we just need to go in a little bit just to fix that corner in place. Maybe a couple more. I'm going to do a back stitch just to reinforce that opening so that the stitches don't fall apart as I'm stuffing. And I'm going to clip all my threads. We don't want our, even though it's going to be on the inside, we want like everything to look neat here. And these here that where we repaired. Okay. Now, if you want to really make your corners neater and less bulky, you can clip off the corner. Don't cut the thread, just the fabric. Very close to the stitching, but don't cut the stitching. That would be bad. You get little holes. Okay, so you see how it's clipped close, but we didn't cut the thread. So now we're going to turn it right side out. And this is the same from here on as if you sewed it by hand to have it on the outside. I mean on the inside. So we're going to poke out our pokey little corners. Sometimes you use the blunt. If your scissors are sort of blunt, you can sort of poke with them, or use a blunt pencil or a knitting needle to get your corners out. We want our points out, and you see how the ribbon came out the top here. So everything is, I could poke that out a little bit more. Don't poke too hard because you'll poke a hole. Maybe the blunt end of my, that looks okay. All right, so now we're going to stuff it. Okay, the same way I showed you before. You're just going to take little pieces and stuff them in the points. You don't need a lot. You just want to puff it out a little bit. Maybe poke it in there a little bit with your blunt instrument. Get all your corners. See, it would be very hard to stuff this if you stopped at the corner, because you wouldn't be able to stuff your corner. You'd have no corner to stuff. So always start, when you have something with corners, always give yourself a little room to the corner to make the actual corner. Okay, now we're going to take little pieces, fill in the gaps, just loosely. too hard to sew it shut if it's really, really chubby. Okay, I think that should probably do it. Once we get it closed, we can press it out a little bit more. Okay, so now I'm going to show you how to, the best way, the neatest way is to hand sew it shut. You can sew it shut on the machine, but it's just not pretty, I don't think. Okay, so we're going to roll up our, make a knot, roll it up. I'm going to pin this shut. Now, actually, let's do this first. I keep changing my mind about things. So now I'm going to, I have my needle thread. I'm going to go underneath, I'm going to open this up and go underneath the flap of fabric there to hide my needle so that it's tucked in inside. See that? Oops, no, I don't want to do that. Try to come up on where it's folded over with your needle. And then push it up through. And as usual, my thread has tangled. Oh, great. I got a knot. Naughty, naughty thread. Well, you know what? I probably have enough to finish it, so I'm just going to clip it off where the knot is. This may not always work for you. All right. I'm being a bad example today. All right, so now you've got your thread up in the fold. Now we're going to pin it closed. Make sure your edges are together. Make sure your seam is folded under in there, a full 1/4 inch on each side, just as if you would sew it. Continue sewing it. Okay, so we're going to pin these together so that, first stay with my new hands. Get in there. So now we're pinned together. Now I'm going to show you the ladder stitch. So we've come up on this side. Now we're going to go straight across and go down in the same place on the opposite side. And then we're going to go into where it's folded over and take a stitch on the same side that we just went down in. So we got one stitch. Now we're going to go back to this side. I'm going to go across exactly the same place on the opposite side. Sure we are. Go down into the fold. Come on. And come up below. And you see, if you do it right, you can hardly see where your stitches are. So now we're going to come back across to this side, take a little stitch inside the fold, come out the other side, pull it tight. Not so tight that it bunches, pull it snug. Okay, so then we're going to go back to this side. Go down into the fold, get a stitch, come back up. Do you see why we call this the ladder stitch? Because you're kind of making rungs, like on a ladder. Okay, straight across, into the fold, and out. Back to the other side. I don't know why I'm having so much trouble getting into that side. come up and pull snug down into the side. Down, catch it, keep sliding off. My needle not pointy enough. Take a stitch, pull it snug. And see, do you see the stitches? If you say no, then you're doing the right thing. Okay, so we're on this side. We're going to go across over to the other side. I'm going to get rid of this pin now because I think we don't need it anymore. That's part of the problem. Maybe it's too stretched too tight with the pin there. Take your stitch in the fold. A little thread bubble. It's okay. Come straight across. Down into the fold. Pick up a stitch. Across, snug. Back the other side. The important thing is to try to come up on the opposite side exactly across from where you came up on this side. And that's how your stitches seem to disappear, because they're coming right straight across. Okay, I think one more will do it. Okay, now we have the last side going across. We're going to take a stitch and we're going to pull we're not going to make another stitch in the fold. We're going to get our thread off of our button and we're going to pull down almost tight but not quite. We got a little loop there. We're going to come up through the loop and then pull it tight. Pull it as tight as you can get it there. You want to not be able to see that knot very well. If you can kind of get down in the dip in between the stitches, that helps. And I've got another thread bubble. Stop making thread bubbles. Okay, so I'm going to go down and again take another stitch right at where I took the last one. Stop punching up. Go through the loop. Sometimes this happens. Dang it. All right, well, that's not very pretty. And I would venture to say, since it's already knotted, that you could probably just cut that off. I keep getting stuck on this button. Take another stitch. And cut off that whole mess and pretend it never happened. So you can kind of, you see that a little bit, but can't see it that much. And look, can you see my other stitches? I didn't think so. They're invisible. Okay, so there is the tree with the stitches hidden inside, and here is the tree with the stitches on the outside. So you decide which one you like better. If you like the kind of rustic looking raw edge sticking out there, or if you like the more refined kind of stylized tree. But there you go. There are your little holiday ornaments that you can put on your tree or decorate around your house, whatever you like to do. And I hope you had fun. I hope it turned out well, and I would love to see your products. So you can send me a photo or post a photo on Facebook and show me what you've done. Thanks for joining me. Have a happy holiday.